Somewhere, at some point in history, a group of people looked at one guy. Not a god, not a superhero, just a guy, and they agreed to give him the palace, the army, their food, and possibly a direct line to the divine. Everyone else was expected to act completely normal about it. Here's the part that should actually stop you. For roughly 290,000 of the 300,000 years modern humans have existed, this never happened. Not once. No kings, no emperors, no dynasties, just small groups of people, with one incredibly effective response to anyone who got too full of himself. So something broke, and by the end of this video, I'm going to show you the exact object responsible for it. Not a person, not a conquest, an object, one you probably touched this week, without thinking about it once. Keep that in your head, because I'm coming back to it, and the answer is weirder than you're expecting. Let's start with a world before kings. Picture a hunter-gatherer band, 40 people, give or take. Now try becoming a dictator inside it. You demand extra meat at dinner. That's move one. By morning, the whole camp is quietly joking about you behind your back. No leader handed down that punishment. Gossip just did the job a police force would later do. You push again. People stop cooperating with you specifically. Nobody announces it. They just quietly stop inviting you on the hunt. You push a third time, and one morning, you wake up. Half the group has packed their entire lives onto their backs and walked to the next valley because your cousin over there doesn't have a superiority complex. Anthropologists have an actual term for this. Leveling mechanisms. Mockery, gossip, exclusion, and the ultimate penalty, just walking away with everything you own strapped to your back. But here's the twist people get wrong. This wasn't an equal society. Skilled hunters got real respect. Good storytellers got real influence. You could be the most admired person in the entire camp, actually beloved, and still get laughed out of the room the second you tried to command people instead of earning them. Do the math. When everything you own fits in one bag, leaving costs you nothing, which means staying under a bad leader costs you everything. Nobody was choosing that. So if you're wondering why it took our species 250,000 years to produce a single king, that's the whole answer, right there. The environment made permanent rulers structurally impossible, not culturally unlikely. Structurally impossible. Quick pause. If this is the kind of, wait, why did nobody ever explain it like this? History that actually rewires how you see the world. Subscribe now, because part 2 takes a much darker turn, and I don't want you to miss it. Here's the twist nobody tells you. No one invented kings on purpose. Humans invented something else. Something that looked like an unambiguous win, and kings walked in through the side door. As a side effect, that something was farming. Specifically, a single planted seed. Think about what one seed actually commits you to. You plant it, and you've just made a promise to stay in that exact spot for months, maybe a full year, waiting. You build a storage pit for the harvest, and now you've created something worth guarding, worth stealing, worth passing down. Your escape button, the one that worked for 290,000 years. Just leave, stops being free. Your barley is hay. Your goats are hay. Your parents are buried 3 steps from your front door. Try starting over in the forest with none of that. See how appealing freedom feels then. Sit with this for a second, because it's the actual thesis of this whole video. Humans spent hundreds of thousands of years building tools specifically designed to prevent permanent hierarchy, mockery, gossip, mobility, and then we built one grain silo, purely because we wanted dinner to be less stressful. And every single one of those defenses switched off at once. Nobody voted. Nobody noticed it happening. And once people stop moving, small advantages stop resetting and start piling up. Picture 2 families in an early village. Side by side, family A has slightly better soil, or more cousins around during harvest, or just 3 lucky seasons back to back. Their storage pit fills up. Family B, next door, has 1 bad year, so family A lends them grain. That favor becomes a debt. That debt becomes an obligation. That obligation becomes a marriage. That marriage produces heirs, who inherit land, animals, and, this is the part that matters, status. It stacks, generation after generation, like the cruelest interest rate you've never heard of. Except the currency isn't money. It's power over other people. Now, before you assume this story is simple, farming causes surplus. Surplus causes kings. Roll credits. I need to hand you the wrinkle that keeps actual archaeologists up at night. There's a site in modern-day Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. It's roughly 11,000 years old. Read that number again. That predates farming as we understand it. Massive carved stone enclosures, built by people who were, as far as we can tell, still hunter-gatherers. No permanent villages. No storage pits. No obvious king-giving orders. And yet, they organized enough coordinated labor to carve and move stones weighing several tons apiece. That one site quietly wrecks the tidy version of this story. Maybe farming didn't have to come first. Maybe, in at least some places, people built something something impressively complex before agriculture ever locked them in place. File that away. It matters later. For now, back to Mesopotamia, where the trap really does spring shut, and where I owe you that object I promised at the start. By around 3200 BCE, a city called Uruk, in what's now southern Iraq, had become something no human settlement before it had ever pulled off. Not massive by modern standards. Nobody there was complaining about rent, but compared to every village that came before it, this was a different species of settlement entirely. Monumental buildings, specialized craftspeople, long-distance trade, enough total strangers living in one place that remembering who owed who 3 baskets of barley simply stopped working as a system. So here's your object. Humans started writing it down, and this is the detail that never makes the movie version of history. The earliest written tablets from Uruk aren't poems. They are not declarations of divine kingship. They are inventory, grain counts, animal counts, labor logs, rations. One surviving tablet lists roughly 120 separate officials, people tied to law, farming, livestock, craft production, religious duty. Civilization's opening move wasn't literature. It was a spreadsheet made of clay. That's the object, a tax record. Once you have officials, you have an org chart. Once you have an org chart, you have a hierarchy that exists whether or not any one specific person is even alive. A job title that outlives whoever's currently sitting in it. That's not a warlord seizing a throne in one dramatic night. That's authority quietly becoming permanent. One ledger entry at a time, built by bureaucrats, whose names got erased by history almost immediately. Real quick, if the first writing in human history was literally a tax spreadsheet, makes you laugh more than it should. Drop a comment with the most boringly bureaucratic fact you know. I read every one, and some of you clearly know something unhinged. Everything so far creates the conditions. This part is what actually locks the door. A city sitting on stored grain, controlled irrigation, and valuable farmland isn't a secret. It's a target. Trade routes get raided. Herds get stolen overnight. Fields get contested by whoever's on the other side of the river. A city under repeated threat stops prioritizing fairness and starts prioritizing whoever can organize a defense fast enough to keep everyone breathing. People will hand over authority during a crisis that they would never hand over on a normal Tuesday. That's not really a flaw in human psychology. It might be one of its more useful features. When enough of those crises in a row, and something subtle happens, the person we trust to lead us right now quietly becomes the person who leads us, period. Captured wealth buys loyalty. Loyalty builds a standing following, and a standing following doesn't just disband. Because the emergency is technically over, you don't have to seize power by force. When fear will hand it to you, one crisis at a time, and thank you for taking it. By the early dynastic period, cities across Mesopotamia, Ur, Kish, Lagash, Uruk, were fully formed political rivals, actively competing with each other, and the single most physically undeniable proof of what had happened by this point is sitting in the ground. At Ur, archaeologists digging the royal cemetery there found graves from roughly 2600 BCE, stacked with staggering wealth, gold, silver, lapis lazuli, imported from what's now Afghanistan, over 1,000 miles away, on foot, on donkeys, musical instruments, weapons. Some burials even included multiple attendants, interred right alongside the primary body, and historians still argue over exactly what happened during those funerals. But the message buried in those tombs isn't subtle. These were not ordinary people, and everyone alive at the time absolutely knew it. There's also an object from Ur, called the Standard of Ur, decorated with rows of soldiers, captives, labors, animals, and dead center, one figure drawn noticeably larger than every single person around him. Ancient artists weren't bad at perspective. Size was politics, deliberately, in permanent stone and shell inlay. By this point, leadership had stopped being one persuasive guy, talking people into things face to face. It had become embedded in architecture, in ceremony, in written titles, eventually, in bloodlines. That's the exact moment kingship becomes recognizable in the date. Here's where it stops being simple. Archaeology is excellent at proving kings existed. It's frustratingly bad at explaining why thousands of people agreed to kneel. There's no surviving memo from 3000 BCE, titled, "Minutes from the meeting where we decided this guy is sacred now." So historians argue over a handful of competing theories. And honestly, all of them are probably true, to different degrees, in different places. Theory 1. Warfare. Successful commanders attract followers, hand out captured wealth, and quietly convert temporary emergency authority into something permanent. Theory 2. Economic control. Whoever manages the grain, the irrigation, the trade routes, eventually ends up managing the people who depend on those things. Theory 3 might be the strongest. Religion. A soldier can only force you to obey, while he's physically standing there watching you. A god can supervise your behavior when nobody's watching at all. That's not a small upgrade. That's total control. 24 hours a day, for free, which is exactly why so many early rulers didn't just call themselves strong. They called themselves chosen. And Theory 4 is the one people least want to hear, because it's the least satisfying. Maybe some of this was, on some level, chosen. As cities grew from dozens of people to tens of thousands, you could no longer solve every dispute by gathering everyone around one campfire. Irrigation needed maintenance. Construction needed organized labor. Someone had to do the actual coordinating. And centralized authority may have solved real, expensive problems that a leaderless crowd simply couldn't. Which means the earliest kings probably weren't simple tyrants, and probably weren't selfless public servants either. They might have been both, in the same body, at the same time, organizing the irrigation and collecting the tribute, defending the city, and commissioning a monument celebrating himself for defending the city. Here's the detail that should actually stick with you. After this video ends, Mesopotamia built kingship one way. Egypt built it on a completely different timeline, tangled up with a different religion, and its own relationship to the Nile's yearly flood. Some societies built enormous, complex cities without installing anything resembling a king. Others developed sharp inequality before anything resembling a formal state ever showed up. There was no single formula, no universal on-ramp into monarchy, just the same dangerous raw ingredients: surplus, permanence, coordination problems, violence, religion, combining slightly differently, depending on exactly where and when you drop them in. History refuses to hand us one clean origin story, no matter how badly we want one, which is exactly why who invented kings might be the wrong question from the start. Nobody invented kingship the way someone invents a wheel. It assembled itself, piece by piece, out of tools built for completely different reasons, until enough of those pieces locked together, in the same place, at the same time, and walking away from a bad leader stopped being free, maybe for the first time in the entire history of our species. So here's your actual answer, the one I promised at the top. We didn't build kings because we suddenly wanted to be ruled. We spent almost the entirety of human existence building tools specifically designed to prevent exactly that outcome. Then we built something else: permanent homes, stored grain, growing cities, things that felt like pure progress. And they quietly dismantled every one of those defenses without anyone ever casting a vote. Somewhere between a planted seed and a clay tablet, obedience stopped being something you demanded and started being something you inherited. If this actually changed how you think about power, hit subscribe. This channel exists for exactly that feeling, and there's a lot more of it coming. Drop a comment telling me which theory you buy most: war, grain, religion, or coordination, because I read every single one, and I genuinely want to argue with you about it. And if you want to see how this gets even weirder, the video on kings who claim to literally be gods is linked right here. And I promise you, it's a deeper rabbit hole than this one.